They are hundreds of young men from all across the country, their deaths labeled as accidental drownings. Now, these retired detectives say it's murder.
Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. I'm Michelle.
And for those of you that are new here, welcome to our channel. My name is Jessie. We are Moms on Crime, and in this channel we talk about true crime and everything paranormal. And today Michelle has a very crazy, creepy story for us. So what are we talking about today, Mama?
All right, Mama, today's story freaked me out so bad because it's a scenario that I never really thought of until I read this, and just the thought of it freaked me out so bad. Okay, so have you ever heard of the smiley face murders or murder theory? Have
I
you
think I've
ever
heard
about
a
it?
little bit of it. It kind of sounds familiar, but I'm not too familiar with like the storyline or whatever. But the title itself, it's like creepy already. The smiley face murders. Oh my
So,
god.
okay, there's an actual murderer, like a serial killer. He's been convicted, he's in jail, he's the smiley face killer, right? So whenever I would see this headline like about this, I always thought it was him. So I never read any of these stories or watched anything on them until like last week. I was looking for the next story to do on here on our YouTube channel, and I found this and it freaked me out. So smiley face murder theory. It was developed by two retired New York police detectives. It's a theory that they came up with in their time working in New York as homicide detectives, because there was a few murders that they felt like didn't add up, and they felt like they should have been homicides, classified as homicides, and they weren't. So when they retired, they actually kept working on these cases, and they discovered that there is a bunch of murders across like the upper East Coast and the Midwest, and they all have the same MO, and they actually think that all of these are connected and that they're actually murders. And if they're right, it's over 200 probably.
Oh wow.
So their theory is that there's a gang or like an organization of serial killers, not one serial killer, but several serial killers working together. So this is the MO. There's been hundreds of white males, like early 20s, college age, who have ended up in large bodies of water, who appear to have accidentally drowned, but upon further investigation, they're not drownings. They're not accidental drownings. All these young men have all disappeared after going out with friends, either to bars, sporting events, where there's large crowds, right? They disappear, and within days or weeks they show up in lakes or rivers. But when police start looking at the murders, they don't actually look like drownings. So I'm only going to tell you about a few because there's too many. The police actually think that this started in the late 90s and has been suspected murders all the way up into like the 2011-12 range.
Oh wow. That's not too far back.
No. And the
And it
reason they
started back in the 90s?
back in the 90s, like one of these that I'll tell you about, one of the young men, he was actually celebrating New Year's Eve when it went 99 to 2000. And they've nicknamed it the smiley face murders because at almost every crime scene, not every single one, but a good portion of them, they've found smiley faces like graffitied on either where the man went missing from or from the suspected murder scene or dump scene where they think that the body was dumped into the body of water. There is graffiti and it's a smiley face.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So that's like them. Like that's like their signature or something. Hey, we did this.
Yeah, that's like their
When
calling
you
card.
said, so the title is Smiley Face Murders, and then you said like it's a gang, like they believe that, you know, it's a gang of serial killers or whatever. I don't know why, but for some reason I thought of the Joker.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, but just thinking about that, that is so scary to think that what if like somewhere on the dark web or somehow there's a place where serial killers know where to go and they can all work together. Like there's a group of them that trust each other, that know, hey, you're a serial killer and I'm a serial killer. Let's work together.
Let's do it. And
like that is so scary to me. Oh,
that
and
is
then
very creepy.
yeah.
Imagine. Oh my gosh, I hope they got caught.
Isn't that scary? Like just thinking about that there's like actually a group of them that work together, that know about each other and they like help each other out. Yeah.
Oh
and then also in a big portion of these murders, they found GHB in their system. You know what GHB is? It's like roofies, like the date rape drug.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The men have GHB in their system. So I was reading that it's actually we all have it naturally in our body. Like I guess our body produces it, but in these instances where they found it in their system, it's at a much higher level, much higher.
Wait, so their victims, they're only male?
All male. They're all college students in their early 20s, and they kind of describe them as like most of them are like athletic white males, like your college dude, like a frat dude, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All of them match that same description. So that's what they were like. Or is there a group of serial killers that have banded together that all maybe have an issue with men that are like that, with like your regular frat boy, and they don't like them and they've joined together, they've joined forces, and they're working in multiple states murdering them? Because it's not like one or two, it's like 7 unexplained drownings of white males in one lake, 10 in another. That's like kind of weird. And in a few of these, I was reading like one of the guys, I saw it on Oxygen has right now, the Oxygen channel, they have a whole documentary on there right now. And it's like, I can't even remember how many episodes it is. It's a lot. And one of the guys, or like a few of the guys that were saying like he was out drinking with his friends, but his friends were watching what he was doing and he wasn't like excessively drinking. And one of them, all of a sudden he got really sick. Like he couldn't even walk on his own, but he had had like 2 beers. And he drinks, he's not like, he's like a lightweight and new at drinking, right? Like he socially drinks, right? And all of a sudden he couldn't even walk on his own. He was like stumbling all over the place. They got him in like a taxi or in someone's car and he was like projectile vomiting in the back seat, and it was so sick. Like they went to some hotel room and the doorman at the hotel wouldn't let him in, and that's how he came up missing. So the theory is if these serial killers are working together, somebody drugs them, gets something in their drink, and then follows them. So if there's a group working together, they can follow them, watch where they go, and then kidnap them. And because I'm going to explain like a few murders to you, there's too many, but I picked the ones that were on the Oxygen channel on their documentary. These men, they go missing for days, weeks, months, but when they find their bodies, the decomposition does not match that of somebody who's been in water or been dead for weeks. That is the scary part. Oh, it's so scary. It's so freaky.
So they didn't die because of drowning, so their bodies were just dumped in the water?
Yeah, and like one guy, he was missing for like 70 some days, but when they found him, he had not been dead 70 days. They said maybe a day or 2. But their initial like autopsy, they ruled all of them accidental drownings. All of them. Watch what? Okay, I'll start reading some of them to you. The first one I'll tell you about.
This is getting...
It's crazy when I started reading it. It was crazy. All right, so Dakota James is the first one I'll tell you about. He was also in his early 20s. He went missing on January 25th, 2017. Him and his friends went out for a night out in downtown Pittsburgh. It's over on like the north side. Not familiar with it. We're not from the east. We're not from the East Coast.
No.
So he left the bar ahead of his friends, and from all accounts, he was not drunk. He wasn't stumbling. He was fine. He left the bar, and the last known picture of him alive was taken from a surveillance camera in an alley, and he was headed to the direction of where he lived. And then after that, there's no trace of him. And then 40 days later, his body was found in the Ohio River. And the thing that made it so strange, after 40 days, there was very little decomposition internally and externally. And it appeared that his body had not been in the river for 7 weeks. And there was very little physical damage to him, very little scratches or cuts or abrasions, but they're saying there's no way, because his body would have traveled at least 10 miles in the river and gone through a dam. And after 40 days, his body was in pristine condition. Like, he basically still looked like his missing poster.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that there was marks on the back of his neck that looked like ligature marks, like he had been strangled. But there was nothing around his neck when they found him. And the weird thing was, there was no mention of these marks in his initial autopsy, but they're on the autopsy photos. So there was no damage, very little damage to him. They couldn't even say for sure that he died from strangulation because there was no internal damage to his neck, but there was ligature marks. Yeah. And there was blood pooled in his fingertips on both of his hands, and there was like markings on his fingers, and police think that was from him trying to grab the ligature, right?
Oh, so that was his own?
Yes, but
Blood
40 days,
demons.
and after 40 days in the water, they said he did not. People that recovered his body, detectives that initially investigated it, said he did not appear to be in the water for 40 days, but his death was ruled an accidental drowning. I don't know. So then the next one, Luke Holman. Luke Holman had left home, and his parents were worried about him. They sent him off to the University of Wisconsin La Crosse in 2005. And his mom actually had a fear of him living so close to the Mississippi River. But it's like a known thing in their family that he really didn't enjoy the water. Luke did not enjoy the water a lot. And he told his mom, like, Mom, you have nothing to worry about. I'm not going to go in there, and where I'll be at school and where I need to be, if I'm not going to go that way, I don't need to go that way.
Yeah.
So fall of 2006, Luke disappeared from downtown La Crosse. He was out celebrating Oktoberfest with a group of friends. 3 days later, his body was discovered floating in the Mississippi River not far from shore. And the weird thing is, they searched there for him. They had looked there for him, and he was not there, but 3 days later, his body pops up.
Well, maybe while they were searching, they didn't put his body in there yet.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, they already searched there, so let's dump the body.
Yes. So, autopsy was done, and his death was ruled an accidental drowning.
Mm-hmm.
And it said that he had acute alcohol intoxication. And again, his friend said, we don't think he had that much to drink. And they just told his family that, no, we don't think so. We think he probably went down there to the shoreline to like go pee or something, and he accidentally fell in, and he was so drunk that he drowned. But his mom the whole time was very outspoken, like, no, that's not what happened to my son. There's no way. He wouldn't go to the river. Why would he go that direction when he didn't even live that way? He would have gone the other direction. So his mom said, no, there's just no way. I don't believe it. So when they did an investigation from his autopsy, they determined that his body and the decomposition would have put him in the water for 3 to 12 hours, not 50 hours or 3 days that he was missing. Again, the body doesn't add up with the circumstances, right? Like that evidence doesn't, none of it adds up. And he also had some weird injuries to his forehead. And on the show that I watched, it was kind of crazy. They think that maybe someone with a boot, or like, you remember like those chunky like Fila looking shoes that almost look like a boot?
Yeah.
When they overlaid it with, or not a Fila, a K-Swiss shoe, it lined up perfectly, like they had on a shoe and they were holding him down with a foot on his forehead. And they got his clothes, and so he had been in the Mississippi River, right? So I guess the Mississippi River is like notoriously muddy, right?
Yeah.
But his clothes were clean. He was clean. There was no mud on him. Like, they said if he had been in the Mississippi River for 3 days, there would have been mud all over his clothes, but there wasn't. And they also found paint. Like, it looked like specks of something fluorescent on his sweater. So they did some, like, you know, forensics, or, you know, they started looking at whatever that was. And it turns out the flecks on his sweatshirt are from like an acrylic type of paint or spray paint. And there's a smiley face there near where they think he went in.
I thought there was a smiley face on the paint. That's why I was like,
they got the spray paint on his sweatshirt. So, and again with him, nothing matched up. His decomposition, it didn't match up. Injury pattern, none of it added up with the scenario that the police were telling his family. So that one, it was left as an accidental drowning, but his parents were still fighting it. And then there's William Will Hurley. He was 24 years old. He vanished from a Bruins hockey game in Boston, Massachusetts. He was there with some friends, and he left halfway through the hockey game. He called his fiancée, Claire, to come pick him up, and he told her where he was. And there's also surveillance video of him. You can see him walking outside it's called TD Garden Stadium. But when she got there to pick him up, he was nowhere to be found. He wasn't out there, and she kept calling his cell phone and he wasn't answering. She could not find him at all. So he was missing. And 6 days later, on October 14th, 2009, he was found floating also in a river, in the Charles River, which is not far from the arena he was at watching a hockey game. And it was apparent he had suffered blunt force trauma to his head, and he had like his eye sockets, like there was like a lot of damage and like a black eye, and
like he got beat up.
Yeah, like he got beat up, and investigators were trying to tell his family that, he fell in the river, and those injuries are from falling. But I saw this investigator talking, I think she may be a medical examiner, and she said, if you are so drunk and you fall, you're going to hit the parts of your body that stick out. You're going to hit your nose, you'll hit your chin, maybe your cheek, your forehead, not in your eye sockets. That's like consistent with getting in a fight. Toxicology done on him also revealed he had an elevated level of GHB in his system. And friends said at the hockey game, he was only there half the game. He didn't drink much. He wasn't intoxicated when he left them. And also in the Charles River, there was 10 other young men that had mysteriously drowned in that river that had all been classified as accidental drownings leading up to his. Right. It's pretty crazy. Let's let's see. Oh, and they said about his injuries with the contusion that was in his on his eye. The doctor that these retired detectives, they have like a little team working with them to help them go over each case to help them. They're actually representing it to the local law enforcement in all these cities. They're trying to get all these cases reopened and investigated as homicides, not as accidental drownings. And she said for that injury that he had on his eye, for that bruise to appear, your heart still needed to be pumping. That wasn't an injury that happened after he drowned while he's floating in the river. That was an injury, she said, that happened for sure before he died. His heart was still pumping. He was alive. Yes. And then they these detectives, they have like a lot of different people helping them investigate. So they actually did this some research on the current in the river, and they're saying there's no chance with the current and the winds and everything from that day that his body, it basically would have had to have floated against the current with the wind, right? So say the wind and the current's going this way, his body floated against it to end up from where he was to where they found him. And they're saying there's no way. And those investigators are saying there is other human interaction involved with this besides like this is not just an accidental drowning. Yes. There's another. So there's Brian Welsing. He was described as easygoing and athletic. He was 21 years old. He disappeared from a Y2K celebration. So that was from 99 to 2000, New Year's Eve. He was in Chicago, Illinois. His body was found 77 days later. So he disappeared from Chicago. His body ended up in Gary, Indiana, in a river.
What?
In Lake Michigan, not in a river. He ended up from Chicago, Illinois, all the way in Gary, Indiana, in Lake Michigan, 30 miles south. But what they're saying is, if you were gone for 77 days and you were in the water the whole time, you might have gone further than 30 miles in 77 days. Okay, so this story is a little gross. I'm going to get a little gross with this, but it's all part of the investigation. So if you can't handle, like, talk about bugs and decomp, then you shouldn't stop listening now. His death was ruled undetermined drowning. That's what they told his parents, but his parents said no, and they kept fighting. It looked like what they said when they pulled his body out of the river or out of the lake, it didn't look like he had been in there for 77 days. It looked like he had only been missing a week. They said he was fresh. He still looked very much himself. And they said the decomposition was very little. Even though it was cold outside, because over there, in a Lake Michigan, it was probably very, very cold. But the water would not have preserved him. They're saying that internal organs, everything was essentially intact. And okay, so this is pretty gross. I guess there's like skin slippage that will happen if your body is in the water for like an extended amount of time. There was no skin slippage. His skin was still intact. And they were saying that there was also, like, in his chest cavities, there was no fluid in his lung or chest cavity. Only a small amount of sand was found in his larynx. But there's absence of fluid in the lungs and sand in the tracheal bronchial tree or the respiratory passages. None. So they're saying if he had drowned, there would have been a lot of sand, there would have been a lot of water, his body would have been bogged down with water, but it wasn't. Not at all. And then also they talked about the postmortem lividity. Do you know what lividity is? Lividity is the way your blood will pool in your body, so they can tell how you were laying when you die. If you're there for like a few hours, they can tell maybe if someone tried to move you or something by the way the blood pooled in your body. So the lividity in his body was fixed on the posterior surface of his body, meaning that he died and remained on his back for hours. But with Lake Michigan at that time of year, they're saying that it's very turbulent and there's no way he would have just stayed on his back and floated 30 miles all the way to another state. They're trying to say he stayed on his back that whole way. And then also they talked about I guess like rigor mortis in his body. It didn't add up. None of it added up. Oh, and they said about the lividity, I guess it appears after 12 hours. And by the way that his body looked, they estimated that he looked like he had only been dead 36 hours, not 77 days.
Wow.
36 hours. So where was he that whole time? If he wasn't dead 77 days, where was he?
Right.
Yeah.
And autopsy can't figure that out. Like
they do. Yes, but all the initial autopsies, it's like they just did it and threw it together, and then they told the family like, oh, they accidentally drowned. But it's like, well, how come he looked like this?
Exactly.
But he should have been in the water this long, and he does not look like that at all. So far, all these men, their bodies don't match the circumstances at all.
Right. And it's
and then
somebody was not doing their job.
No, I think they just want to. I think maybe they don't want to say that they're serial killers. I think a lot of times maybe police departments are scared to say there's a serial killer. Maybe, I don't know, because it scares people so bad. And I think they wait. I actually think they wait a long time before they tell people there's a serial killer. Unfortunately, because you put everybody in danger by doing that.
That's crazy.
No. There's another one, Tommy Booth. He was 24 years old. He was discovered face down in Woodland, Pennsylvania in a creek 2 weeks after he went missing. There was suspicious footprints and marks near the site of where they found him. Like they maybe tried to drag him into the water. There's like a lot of talk about like the drag marks are around him, and there was also a smiley face found graffitied onto the bar where he was last seen alive. Yeah. And for him, he was in the water. He should have been in the water for 14 days, right? He was missing for 2 weeks. And, they tell the family that he drowned. He was in the water for 14 days, but also his appearance did not match that. And this is going to get gross again. Again, they were saying that you would see excessive bloating and skin slippage, and he didn't have that at all. There was also fixed lividity on his body, which suggests that he died laying on his back, and he stayed in that way for a substantial period of time. But also, they're saying you're not going to be on your back on a hard enough surface floating in a creek. You need something hard underneath you to cause that lividity to happen. And if you're floating on your back in the creek, that's not going to happen. And then, like those local investigators, they tried to argue that maybe his body was frozen. But what I was reading is the body will freeze like the fatty tissues and like all of that. But lividity has to do with muscles and joints, and so does rigor mortis. But the rigor mortis that they found, so this was kind of interesting. I guess when you pass away and you get rigor mortis, it sets in within 8 to 10 hours after your death, and it only stays for 10 hours and then it subsides. When his body was found, he still had rigor mortis, like he had not been dead very long. No, and that's what they said. Based on the rigor mortis, he had not been dead for 14 days, more like less than a day. And there's another 22-year-old Todd Gieb. He was found July 2nd, 2005. He was found in the Muskegon, in a private lake in Muskegon, Michigan. He was last seen alive at an orchard party 21 days before. So that's 3 weeks. And he just disappeared. And they assumed that he wandered off and fell in the lake and drowned. And he was also, his cause of death was ruled as an undetermined drowning. However, when his mom saw pictures of his autopsy, she also started to fight back because, again, he didn't look like he had been in water for 3 weeks. He was in pristine condition. pristine. And a lot of these, they talked to the men that helped recover the body from the water, and they said these guys looked exactly like their missing poster. They looked like they had just gone in the water. They had not been there for weeks. He only had Todd Geeb only had moderate decomposition, and his clothes were clean. And I guess in this water there's a specific type of algae that forms, like a biofilm. It wasn't on him. He didn't have any allergy on him or any of that. And then this is kind of gross too. It looks like maybe part of his head was like exposed like longer than the rest of his body. And they were talking about there's like a specific type of larvae that I guess turns into like maggots or something. And at that point, if he had been there that long, based on the conditions outside, his body would have been overtaken already, and he
with
had
the maggots,
none. None. He had none. Because I guess like out there where he was found, like it says, he would have been consumed quickly and dramatically within hours. But they said within minutes to hours, the insects would have started based on where he was, and there wasn't any. And it's like he had just been put there when they found him. And this was super gross. This is gross, but it's interesting. These investigators, there's a medical examiner working with them, and they did an experiment with swine carcasses just to see what would happen. So they used like dead pigs, like swine carcasses, and they like roped off an area in that same like body of water to see what would happen. And I guess because a pig skin is very similar to a human skin. Yeah. And it was a 21-day experiment that they did with these dead pigs in the water. And within the first day, they had like taken over the bodies. And I'm so sorry, this is so gross. But within those 21 days, the bodies had been taken over so bad by the insects that they just like collapsed. So they stopped their experiment. There's no way that he had been in the water for 21 days. None. So there are so many more. Seriously, these detectives said it. If they're right, this number is into like the 200s with victims of this group that they feel strongly exists. And this is their hypothesis, that it's a group of serial killers working together. They are kidnapping college age, early 20s white men who it would be easy to say that they were drunk and they ended up in a body of water. However, based on their appearances when they're found, it looks like they're actually being drugged, kidnapped, and tortured for days and weeks before finally being murdered and dumped in a body of water. And they think that they're dumping them in the body of water, one, to wash away evidence because they have not been able to collect DNA on any of them. None of them have DNA on them. And also to make it look like it was an accidental drowning, because if it's a large organization working together, maybe they got cell phones, whatever, and they're saying, oh, I see one. I got one in here. Let's pick this guy. Somebody drugs him. They slip GHB into his beer, and then he starts to not feel good. He leaves on his own ahead of his friends because he's like, no, I'm getting sick. I think you guys stay here. He goes out on his own, and there's a group out there waiting, and they kidnap him, and they take him. And the smiley face is maybe their calling card. Maybe they're leaving smiley faces to say, like, so the other ones will see them, like, oh, they were here. They did this one here. They got it here. Or maybe it's like, hey, don't get one from here because we already did it from here. And it's like, it's too hot, so don't do it here. Yes.
So if they're a gang or something, that's probably like, like a code or a sign. Like, hey, this one's done. We already did it here. Oh my God. So when is the last known incident?
I think it said 2017 was the last one that they feel that they can link to this. But it's kind of sad because 2017, they get a lot of pushback. There was a couple where the evidence that they represented to the local authorities, they are willing to look into it again to maybe change the classification to a homicide, but on a lot of them, it seems like they're just getting a lot of pushback from local authorities. And these detectives feel so strongly about this. They're in retirement and they're still working on them because they really feel like this is the thing. And why could it not be? When I read that and I actually started to think about that, I'm like, that's messed up. Because why would that not happen? Why could that not happen where there was more than one serial killer working? Why would that not happen where it's a big organization that's working together to kill people, right? But when you let your mind go there, that's so messed up and scary to think of.
It is. It's super scary. Just, those words put together. An organization of serial killers.
And a whole gang of them. Like, a
yes.
whole gang of them working together.
No.
Yeah. Mom, that's my
and
story
it's kind of like a movie or something where like they leave their signature or business card or I don't know what you call it.
It's like their calling card.
Yes.
It's crazy. That freaked me out because I've never watched anything about this or like read into it because I actually always thought it was the other killer they were talking about. But it's not. It's something totally different. Completely different. So there's the smiley face killer. He was a serial killer who he murdered women, and I think he like carved a smiley face onto their body. So if you want to look into this, this is called the smiley face murder theory or smiley face murders. And like I said, on Oxygen, I watched it and that was really good. I think it's called like what's it called? A Hunt for Justice. I can put a link to it too in the description. Because it was actually like, that's a really good watch because each episode is about each one of the young men I talked about. They solely investigate that young man on each episode. They pick a different one.
And I wonder what they're doing to them before, they kill them or dump their bodies in the river or the lake or something. Especially that one guy, 77 days?
77 days, and based off decomposition, they said he had been dead a couple of days, maybe.
What were
and
they
all of
doing
them too,
to them?
They search for them too, and they always end up finding them where they have already searched. They find them.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy.
I know.
Maybe they have someone in their gang that's like an undercover helper researcher too, so that they know, okay, they already searched this place, now we can dump the body over there.
Yeah, maybe.
Or
I mean, I'm sure they're watching because that's what they said. They said when they find them after they've already searched there, it clearly feels like taunting. Because why would they be right there?
Yes.
Why would they be right there and they searched there already? And then when you get up on them, they're in pristine condition. They're not crazy. They don't look like they've been in the water for weeks. They look like they've been in the water for hours, maybe. Like, it messed me up. When I read this, I was like, oh, gosh. Ugh. Yeah.
That's crazy. Oh, my gosh. It's like so many questions, and it's like so scary because what if, oh my gosh, a gang of serial killers working together.
And you know what's crazy? You always think like you got to tell girls or you got to tell your daughter, if you send your daughter off to college, like, please be careful. Don't leave your drink if you go to a bar.
Yeah.
Well,
and
they're getting men. They're getting men. And that's what they're saying. It's more than one. It's a group working together. And there's a group that waits outside to kidnap them because they overtake these young men who are healthy. They're athletic. And they're all the same type. When I was doing the research for this, I was actually getting confused because when you look at the pictures, it's all like, they look the same, like almost like the same physical description. You know what I mean? So I would see a picture of one and I would think it was the one I was just reading. And I'm like, oh no, that's like the other guy. Like I kept getting all like messed up when I was doing this.
So what if they're like, okay, we're going to hunt for,
I think so,
this guy with these features and
And then all of these, they're not far from colleges and like universities. So I think they probably hang out in bars near big universities and they go hunting. It's basically like hunting. And they
Yeah.
kind of go in the bar and take a look around, and whoever's like,
Yeah.
easiest prey to drug them. Because all of them, like their friends said, like a couple of the guys, like, or the one where he was like vomiting. I think it was the one for Y2K maybe. And his friend said he didn't even drink that much. He shouldn't have been sick like that and vomiting. Like, then that was the GHB taking effect. Like, he was all disoriented. He couldn't stand up straight. Like, he was a mess. So, of course, the bars don't want him on the inside. You know, if you get too drunk, how the bars will kick you out. So that's like perfect.
Yeah.
They drug them and they look like they're overly intoxicated. They get kicked out of the bar and now they're outside by themselves. And they're disoriented and sick, and they get them. I believe this because, like, I was reading, and it's sad, like, local authorities are kind of, like, brushing off these detectives because they don't believe them. They don't think it's an actual serial killer organization. But when you read it and you actually, like, start looking into it, it makes sense. It totally makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
That's my story, mama.
That's some crazy
Yeah, I'm gonna follow this one. I'm gonna follow.
Oh my
this.
God, I want to
For a
know
long time.
too. And the last known incident just happened back in 2017. So
That
that
they
was
know
not
of?
too far back. Yeah, that they know about.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, you guys comment down below if you want to, see more updates about this and stuff, because Michelle and I are going to look into it. And we're going to follow through. And
Yes.
crazy. Wow. I have so many questions still. So, but
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we hope you guys liked it. I mean, I enjoyed it. I still have so many questions. But if you guys did, please don't forget to like and subscribe.
Please subscribe and leave us comments. Tell us what you think about this story. And down below in the comments, actually tell us if there's a story that you have in mind that you think we should cover. And turn on your notification bell for our channel so every time we upload, you get notified. And that's all we have for today. We'll see you guys next time.